There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when one human being looks at another and for the first time feels completely seen. Not admired, not desired, not impressed, seen. And in that moment, something shifts that no amount of beauty, no amount of charm, no amount of chasing could ever create. This is the moment we are going to talk about today. Not a trick, not a manipulation, not a game to be played on another person's mind, but a truth so old, so deeply written into the architecture of the human soul, that once you understand it, you will never look at connection the same way again. We live in a world obsessed with the surface of attraction. We are told that attachment is built through mystery, through games, through calculated distance and calculated closeness, through knowing exactly when to text back and when to disappear. We are handed formulas as if love were a vending machine. Insert the right combination, and out comes devotion. But anyone who has lived long enough, loved long enough, lost long enough, knows that this is a lie. Real attachment, the kind that lasts, that person carries with them into their dreams and their prayers and their quiet 3 a.m. thought, is never built on tricks. It is built on truth. And the deepest truth of all is this: human beings do not fall for people who perform. They fall for people in whose presence they finally feel safe enough to stop performing themselves. Let that settle for a moment, because everything we are about to explore today unfolds from that single seed. Think about your own life. Think about the people who have left the deepest imprint on your heart. Not necessarily the most beautiful, not necessarily the most successful, not necessarily the ones who played the coolest, most distant version of themselves. Think about the ones who made you feel like you could breathe. The ones around whom your shoulders dropped an inch, your jaw unclenched, your voice softened into something more honest than you use with the rest of the world. That feeling, that rare, precious feeling of being able to exhale, is not an accident. It is the doorway to the deepest attachment a person can ever experience. And today we are going to walk through that doorway together, slowly, honestly, and with the kind of respect this subject deserves. Because here is the truth nobody tells you. The world is full of noise, full of masks, full of people performing confidence they don't feel and certainty they don't have. Every single one of us walks through our days wearing armor we didn't choose to put on. We armor ourselves at work. We armor ourselves in friendship. We armor ourselves even at family dinners, nodding along, saying the right things, keeping the real storm underneath hidden from view. And so when a person finally meets someone in whose presence the armor is not needed, someone who does not flinch at their fears, does not mock their dreams, does not punish their vulnerability, something ancient stirs inside them. It is not infatuation, it is recognition. It is the nervous system itself whispering, "Here finally is a place I do not have to defend myself." This is what we mean when we talk about the one psychological trigger that creates deep, lasting attachment. It is not a look, it is not a body, it is not a status symbol or a clever line delivered at the right moment. It is emotional safety wrapped inside genuine understanding, the experience of being witnessed, fully, without judgment, and accepted anyway. This is what the human heart has been starving for since long before dating apps, since long before social media, since long before any of the games we now mistake for connection. It is ancient. It is written into us from infancy, when the very first bond we ever formed was built entirely on whether we felt safe enough in someone's arms to stop crying. That wiring never left us. We simply grew up and forgot to name it. So let us name it now. Let us speak its name plainly. To be deeply attached to someone is at its core to feel safe enough around them to be fully yourself, and to feel, in return, that the self you revealed was not too much, not too broken, not too strange, but was met with warmth. This is not weakness. This is not neediness. This is the deepest form of strength a relationship can hold, because it takes extraordinary courage to build a space like that for another human being. It takes a level of self-mastery, self-awareness, and inner steadiness that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, because it is far easier to perform than it is to become. And this is where your own journey begins, because you cannot give someone a feeling of safety that you have not first built inside yourself. You cannot offer steady, grounded presence to another person while you are still at war with your own reflection. This is not a speech about changing someone else's mind. It is a speech about becoming someone whose very presence changes the emotional weather in a room. Not because you are trying to impress, but because you have done the quiet, unglamorous work of becoming whole. Think about the people you have met in your life who radiate that certain something. The ones who walk into a room and, without saying a single dramatic word, seem to carry a kind of gravity. People are drawn to them. People relax around them. People find themselves telling them things they haven't told anyone else. Have you ever wondered what that quality actually is? It is not charisma in the way we usually define it. It is not loudness, not charm, not the ability to tell a good joke. It is something quieter and far more powerful. It is the felt sense that this person is not going to judge you, not going to compete with you, not going to use what you say against you later. It is the sense that this person has done enough work on themselves that they do not need to diminish you to feel secure. That is not a technique. That is a way of being. And it can be built, deliberately, the same way anything worth having is built, through awareness, through practice, and through the slow, patient dismantling of everything false we have accumulated over a lifetime of trying to be liked instead of trying to be real. So many people spend their entire lives chasing attachment from the outside in. They believe that if they simply say the right words, wear the right clothes, master the right timing, someone will finally choose them and stay. But attachment built this way is fragile, because it was never rooted in truth to begin with. It collapses the moment the performance can no longer be sustained. And it always, eventually, cannot be sustained, because no human being can wear a mask forever without beginning to suffocate behind it. The people who build lasting bonds are not the ones who perform best. They are the ones who no longer need to perform at all, because they have done the deeper work of coming home to themselves. This is the beginning of what we might call an awakening. Not a religious one, not a mystical one, but a very human, very grounded awakening to the fact that you have spent years, maybe decades, trying to be chosen by others while barely choosing yourself. You have maybe spent nights wondering what you did wrong, what you should have said differently. What version of yourself might have been enough to make someone stay? And in all of that searching, in all of that self-editing, you may have missed the one truth that changes everything. The moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment you become someone that others find almost impossible to walk away from. Not because you have learned to manipulate their emotions, but because you have finally stopped needing their approval to feel like a whole person, and paradoxically, that is exactly what makes people want to stay close to you. There is a strange and beautiful irony hidden inside human connection. The more desperately we chase approval, the more it slips away from us, because desperation has a scent, and people can smell it even when they cannot name it. But the moment we release our grip, not out of coldness, not out of pretending not to care, but out of genuine inner security, something magnetic happens. We stop needing the other person to complete us, and in that freedom we become someone they actually want to be around, because being around us no longer feels like an obligation to manage someone else's emotional hunger. It feels like an invitation into someone else's abundance. This is the shift we are here to talk about today, moving from a life spent seeking to be filled by others, to a life spent building an inner world so rich, so examined, so honest. That connection becomes an overflow rather than a rescue mission. When you no longer need someone to save you from your own emptiness, your relationships transform. They stop being transactions of fear and become expressions of choice. And there is nothing on this earth more attractive to another human being than being chosen freely by someone who does not need them but genuinely wants them. Now, let us go deeper into what actually builds this kind of inner steadiness, because it is not achieved by accident, and it is certainly not achieved overnight. It begins with something most people avoid their entire lives: honest self-examination. Not the surface-level kind, where you list your favorite hobbies and call it self-knowledge, but the kind that requires you to sit quietly with the parts of yourself you have spent years running from. The insecurities, the old wounds, the moments you were humiliated as a child and never processed, the times you were told you were too much or not enough, and quietly rearranged your entire personality to avoid ever hearing those words again. These wounds do not disappear simply because we ignore them. They go underground, and from underground they run the show. They decide who we chase, who we fear, who we cling to, and who we push away before they can leave us first. The work of becoming a person capable of deep, healthy attachment is the work of shining a light into those underground rooms. It is uncomfortable. It is humbling, but it is also the most liberating thing a human being can ever do, because once you understand why you react the way you react, you are no longer controlled by those reactions. You gain, for the first time in your life, the power to choose your response instead of being ambushed by your history. This is not about becoming perfect. It is not about eliminating your flaws until you are some polished, invulnerable version of a person that no longer resembles anything human. In fact, it is almost the opposite. It is about becoming so familiar with your own imperfections that you no longer need to hide them, defend them, or apologize for them. There is a certain peace that settles into a person once they stop being ashamed of who they are. And that peace is contagious. People feel it the moment they step into your presence. They may not be able to explain it, but they will feel, on some instinctive level, that you are not going to punish them for being human, because you have already made peace with your own humanity. This is where genuine emotional intelligence enters the picture, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a form of respect. Emotional intelligence means being able to sit with another person's feelings without needing to fix them, dismiss them, or make them about yourself. It means listening not to respond, but to understand. It means noticing when someone's words say one thing while their eyes say another, and having the patience to gently make space for the truth underneath. Most people go their entire lives without ever being listened to in this way. Most people are used to being half-heard, interrupted, redirected towards someone else's needs. So when they encounter a person who listens with their whole self, no phone in hand, no rehearsed advice ready to be delivered, just quiet, focused presence, it does something to them. It reaches a part of them that has been neglected for years. And the human heart does not forget the people who reach that part of it. It attaches to them, deeply, because it finally found a place to rest. This is why performative confidence eventually fails, while grounded presence endures. Confidence that is built to impress will always require an audience. But presence, the quiet, steady, undistracted attention you offer another human being, does not need an audience. It only needs sincerity. And sincerity is something almost impossible to fake for long, which is precisely why it is so valuable. Anyone can pretend to be interesting for an evening. Very few people can offer someone real, undivided understanding for a lifetime. That rarity is what makes it so powerful. So how does a person actually build this kind of presence? It begins with slowing down. Our entire culture moves at a frantic pace, rewarding quick wit, quick replies, quick everything. But deep connection cannot be rushed. It requires the discipline to pause before responding, to actually absorb what another person has said, instead of already planning your next clever remark. It requires you to become comfortable with silence, because silence is often where the truest things are said, in the space between words, in the breath, before someone admits something they have never told anyone else. If you cannot tolerate silence, you will unconsciously rush people out of their vulnerability, and they will learn, quickly, that it is not safe to be fully honest with you. But if you can hold that silence more without panic, without the need to fill it, you become a rare kind of person. Someone whose presence feels like an open door rather than a closing one. Building this kind of presence also requires you to do something deeply unfashionable in a world addicted to self-promotion. It requires you to become genuinely curious about other people, instead of constantly trying to be interesting to them. Think about the last time someone asked you a question and then actually waited, with real interest, for your answer, not as a courtesy, not as a stepping stone to talk about themselves, but because they truly wanted to know. It is rare, it is unforgettable, and it is completely within your ability to become that person for someone else. Curiosity, real curiosity, is one of the most underrated forms of love there is, because it says, without ever needing to say it directly, "You matter enough for me to want to understand you." But none of this can be sustained if it is only a performance layered on top of an unexamined inner life. This is why the deepest work is always internal before it is ever relational. You cannot offer someone patience you have never practiced with yourself. You cannot offer someone unconditional acceptance while you are still silently punishing yourself for every mistake you have ever made. The relationship you have with yourself becomes the blueprint for every relationship you build with anyone else. If that inner relationship is harsh, critical, and impossible to please, you will unconsciously recreate that same harshness in how you relate to others, no matter how gentle your words try to be. But if you learn to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you deeply love, with patience, with encouragement, with the willingness to try again after failure, that same energy will begin to radiate outward effortlessly into every connection you form. This is the awakening we are speaking of today. Not a single dramatic moment, but a slow, steady turning inward, followed by an equally steady turning back outward, transformed. It is the process of realizing that you were never actually broken, only unexamined. It is the process of realizing that the love and attachment you have been seeking from the outside world has been waiting quietly inside your own capacity to first offer it to yourself. And once you begin offering it to yourself, everything about how you show up in relationships changes. You stop negotiating for your worth. You stop shrinking to be accepted. You stop performing a personality you think someone else wants and start simply being the person you actually are, fully, unapologetically, and with a kind of ease that cannot be faked. And here is what happens next, almost without effort. People notice. They may not be able to explain what has changed about you. They will simply feel that being around you is different now. Easier, safer, more honest. They will find themselves opening up faster than they intended to, telling you things they usually keep guarded, laughing more freely, breathing more deeply. And slowly, without any grand gesture on your part, an attachment begins to form. Not because you chased it, not because you engineered it, but because you finally became the kind of presence that makes attachment feel safe. This is the real secret, if we must call it that at all. It was never about learning the right words to say or the right game to play. It was always about becoming someone whose inner world is steady enough, honest enough, and warm enough that another person can rest inside it. It was always about doing the work that most people avoid, facing your own wounds, questioning your own patterns, learning to sit with discomfort instead of running from it, so that you could offer someone else a space that is rare in this world, a space where they do not have to perform, where they do not have to guard themselves, where they can simply exist and be met with understanding instead of judgment. This work is not easy. It will ask you to look at parts of yourself you have avoided for years. It will ask you to forgive people, including yourself, for things that still ache when you think about them. It will ask you to sit with uncomfortable truths instead of numbing them away with distraction. But on the other side of that discomfort is a kind of freedom that no external validation could ever give you, the freedom of no longer needing to be chosen in order to feel whole, and the strange, beautiful result that this very freedom is what makes people want to choose you in the first place. So if you take one thing from this speech today, let it be this: stop trying to learn tricks to make someone attached to you, and start doing the work to become someone whose presence naturally creates safety, depth, and understanding. Stop performing a version of yourself designed to be impressive, and start returning patiently and honestly to the version of yourself that is simply true. Because in the end, the people who build the deepest, most enduring bonds in this life are never the ones who mastered the art of being chaste. They are the ones who mastered the art of being real, and in doing so, became someone impossible to forget. Let this be the beginning of that work in your own life. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now in this quiet moment as you sit with these words. Look inward before you look outward. Build the steadiness you wish someone else would give you. Offer yourself the understanding you have spent years hoping to receive from others. And watch patiently as the world around you begins to respond to the new energy you carry, not because you demanded its attention, but because you finally became someone worth attaching to, starting with your own unwavering attachment to yourself.